Hi, this is Ted Leslie with Let Out the Clutch, brought to you by Biker Attorney. And I have a new friend today, Ronnie Jones. Ronnie, say hi.
How you doing today?
It's good to see you, man. When you came to the office, it's the first time I've met you, but I've heard your name for a long, long time because you're an Oklahoma legend.
Well, I don't know about the legend part, but yeah, I was born and raised here, and anything connected to motorcycles, pretty much I've been involved with, my entire life. So started riding when I was about, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, and so all the dealers in town, I've either bought bikes from them or ridden motorcycles with them or something. And so yeah, I promoted races at the fairgrounds for about 10 years. Me and a buddy, Keith Brewer, my partner, we promoted AMA Grand National Flat Track races at the fairgrounds for about 10 years, 1991 to 2000.
I was going to ask you what years that was because I moved here with the Air Force. The Air Force dropped me off here in like November of '87.
Mm-hmm.
And new to Oklahoma. I'm from South Carolina, didn't know anybody. Got to know some guys that ride motorcycles, which is
Mm-hmm.
what my affinity is. I've been riding motorcycles my whole life.
Yeah.
And I met some guys, and at the time there was a racetrack at Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, and I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
time frame for this,
Mm-hmm.
but he's passed away. Actually, both have passed away now. One was named Gay Gower and or Gene Gower, and then Bob Truitt, two for different friends of mine. We go down to the flat tracks at Oklahoma City Fairgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved here in '87. It couldn't have been that first year, but probably there soon after. I remember going down there and exactly where it was and just watching this event that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So was that your time frame down there as well?
Yeah, we were the only ones that promoted motorcycle racing at the fairgrounds. There was a kind of they used to, when I was a kid, there was races there, national flat track races, and they ended about 1977. And so there was about a 15-year gap before I grew up and found a partner, and I was still racing at the time. So I had to work on the promotion of the race up to the day of the event, and then I had to have somebody to kind of hand it off to, and Keith Brewer turned out to be that guy. And his family's in the construction business here in town, but we've gone to high school together, and he's an avid motorcyclist enthusiast, and so he was happy to get involved with me. And so I was still racing then, and so I raced in all of those events that we promoted, and it was 10 years we promoted the races there, and then ultimately sold the event off to a larger entertainment group that now promotes the National Supercross Series, Feld Entertainment. It wasn't Feld at the time. It was I forget, Live Nation or one of the others before they got, they've changed hands so many times. Can't think of all the different companies, but either way, yeah, we did that for 10 years, and unfortunately now the track's gone.
Oh, it's
The
been gone a while.
fairgrounds, made the decision to pave Paradise and put up a parking lot, so there's no more racetrack down at the fairgrounds.
There's not nothing like that in Oklahoma that I know of.
No, there's not. Unfortunately, we've and it's funny how things change. You see things heading towards more places that were racetracks being gobbled up, with expansion and city growth and everything. And we're hopeful though at some point, somebody that has the wherewithal and the connections and whatever will decide that Oklahoma City needs a motorsports complex, and will, put together a program to make that happen.
That's happening in a lot of genres of racing because I've got friends that do drag racing, and
Mm-hmm.
Noble's had its struggles down there. Thunder
Mm-hmm.
Valley with struggles as far as ownership and all that sort of thing and survival, and then the neighborhoods encroach upon it and then complain about the crowds and the noise, kind of like an airport or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it gets run out of town. So
Yeah, it's tough to people. We're so I don't know, tuned to for immediate gratification, and so people, if they got to drive 30 minutes to get to to have a racetrack, you generally need to be outside the city limits just for noise issues and all that. And so people go, well, I can either drive 30 minutes down and watch this, or I can go to the movie right down the street, or I can go to dinner or do something. So you have to provide, something that will get them to come. It has to be really entertaining, and that's a whole nother conversation about developing the entertainment. But
no, I had wonderful days down there, memories of my friends and us sitting in the metal bleachers and watching the races in the fairgrounds. And we
mm-hmm.
used to ride down on bikes together and then just hang out and watch the races. But Yeah, those were wonderful times and great friends. And it's funny how many friends you build around motorcycles and your passion for motorcycles. And
Yeah.
and that's where I heard about you through one of these guys, Gerald Timms,
Hmm.
and then Keith Shingleton as well. So
Yeah, the motorcycle community is relatively small, and when you start counting up the number of people around the country that are enthusiasts, we're a small group, and maybe that's what makes it, everybody so tight. Everybody's got the same passion, similar passion, and for me, it's been the thing that I probably enjoyed most about all the different aspects of the sport and riding motorcycles, and the enjoyment I get out of riding has been all the relationships that come from it.
well, and back to the days when you started racing, I've already heard kind of your story. It came from a movie.
Well, yeah, so to speak, the movie On Any Sunday when I was a young impressionable kid happened to come out at a time, I was just about 10 years old, and it came out when I just discovered motorcycles, and woke up every day thinking about riding, and ran home from school every day and would take off and ride until it got dark, and me and my little brother, and then the movie came out on a Sunday, and it opened my eyes to this whole world of I didn't realize that you could actually, quote unquote, make a living racing motorcycles. And so I decided at 10 years old I was going to make my living racing motorcycles. And I'm sure my parents thought that I'd outgrow that, or that it would be a short-lived kind of ambition or dream. So, but I never wavered. And in fact, my little brother David was killed in 1980. He was 18 years old and I was 19, and that really kind of challenged my commitment to the sport. And so I ultimately made the decision to go back. I didn't, I wasn't really sure what the right thing to do was. I went back and raced and won the first race that I rode back, and I felt like that was kind of a little bit of a sign from David to tell me that was where I needed to be. So I continued to race for another 20 years professionally.
Yeah, your career spans generations. It
Yeah.
started in the '70s, I think, late '70s.
Yeah, I was a rookie, professional rookie expert in 1979. And in a little bit, we'll go into a charity that I'm involved with that came from the group of riders that came into the sport in 1979, the rookie class of '79. But yeah, and I rode, nationals pretty much for a living up until 2000. So from '79 to 2000, about 21 years, and and then from there, thought I was retiring kind of for good, and different circumstances. Had a good friend that most flat track motorcycle people are familiar with, the name Terry Poovey. He's from Dallas, Texas, Fort Worth, and he would call me up every year after I retired in 2000. He was still racing, and he was my age, but he had continued to race the national series, and he kept trying to get me to come to Daytona and ride one of his motorcycles. So I went down in 2005, 5 years after I'd retired, and made the national main event down there. And so that, was fun, and I enjoyed that. And Terry, I rode one of his motorcycles, and he raced too. He also made the main event that night, but that led me to, ride another national in 2009 and making the national. And then I had another opportunity in 2011 out in Calistoga, California, and made the national. And at that time, the announcer of all the national flat track events is a guy, he's actually from right here from Oklahoma City, named Scott Dubler. Scotty announces all of the AFT Flat Track Nationals, the series owned by the NASCAR people. And he's known me for a long time, and he's being from Oklahoma City, he's familiar. But he got to thinking about it, and he says, "What was the first national you ever made?" Because he knew this was 2011. So I said '79, and so he started counting. He says, "Well, I think you're the only guy that's ever made a national main event. There's been other guys made a national main event in 4 decades." But he said, "I think you're the only guy to ever make it in 5." And he eventually investigated it and said it was. But he asked me that night, he says, "Do you think you can make it to 6?" And I was like, no way, no way I could make it. And as circumstances had it, had another chance in 2014 to ride and made a national main event. And then 2015, I went to work for American Flat Track, the sanctioning body for the series that I competed in. And so I couldn't race because I was an official, and only worked for them 1 year. And then in 2016, I was like, okay, well, I'm not working for them again. Had another opportunity to race, and made the national main event. And so it started getting towards the end of the decade, and it started thinking about it. And so when I got to about 2018 and made a national main event in 2018, I decided I was going to try to make it national in 2020, and or in the decade,
20s.
So I hired a trainer, really started committing myself to being prepared to
run the event.
make a national, and then COVID hit in 2020, the year, and it shut everything down. The series got shut down. The program changed. AFT's program wasn't a series of qualifying events for the main event. Then they just had a program where you bought your franchise for your space in the main event, and that didn't suit me. I wanted to have to earn my way into the main. Well, finally, after COVID passed and all the, everything got back to normal, they went back in 2022. Scott Conway from Oklahoma City Indian had an Indian FTR 750 that he had sponsored a couple of other riders, and it was just sitting in his shop. And he said, we'd gone to Sturgis together, and he said, Ronnie, he knew that I had wanted to make a main in this decade, and he said, let's take my motorcycle and let's go to Springfield. Let's go get you that 6 different decade. And we did. And so in 2022, we went to Springfield, Scott and I, and my mechanic, Richard Harrison, and made the national there at Springfield, at the Springfield Mile, Labor Day weekend. And so kind of fulfilled that. And so since, I've had other opportunities still to ride and haven't done any. I'm still not sure that I won't at some point, but I'm not getting any younger, and it gets harder and harder to keep in shape, to fit my leathers.
But not only you're racing all these generations, but you're racing successfully. That's what's the most impressive part of this all.
Well, I'm blessed, I guess, in that respect. I've been able to stay healthy enough. I'm out every day on a bicycle, riding 20 or 30 miles a day with my buddies that help keep me in shape. And then I also dirt bike ride. I've got separate set of buddies that ride dirt bikes that also, calling me up every weekend going, come on, let's go ride. And it's too cold. They say, no, come on, let's go. So I go out with them and continue to ride. So all of that, part of it was intentional to stay in shape, to go race a national if I wanted to. And part of it was just because I like to ride and I enjoy somehow the training for racing, also got me addicted to the training part of being out on a bicycle and all that stuff. When I kind of have withdrawals from that when I don't do that as well. So all of that's kind of kept me in shape. So when I do go out, I thankfully, my skills and my fitness haven't dropped off so much that I'm not competitive anymore.
So you don't have a race schedule, but you're not opposed to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Just if something comes up, and that's the way it's always been since I retired, was just depending on the racetrack, the circumstances, if I had a good motorcycle to ride. I have people offer me bikes all the time saying, come out and ride my bike. And so if it, just happens to fit with a upcoming race and I feel good about the shape I'm in, or the track that I'm going to, then that's how I make the decision, just kind of one race at a time, just when I feel like it.
Now, you're inducted to the AMA Hall of Fame a few years back, right?
Yeah, in 2016, I got inducted into the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame, and it was kind of shocking, surprising to me. I had a decent career. I won 10 AMA Grand National mains in my career. I mentioned that winning the first national back after my brother passed, but then after that, which should have been my most productive years, you're 20 to 25, which is when most guys are at their peak in motorcycle racing. I I didn't win another national for 5 years. So that period, I thought about, broke my leg in 1983. We've missed almost the whole season. Had a lot of that time when I thought about quitting, but I thought, well, I won that race. This is where I was supposed to be. And so I stuck it out and ultimately started winning again in 1986. And and then won, another 8 nationals, up till 1994.
Very impressive. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about is your charity you have. So that's something that we need to bring to the people's minds as well. Back to the track.
Yeah, back on track is it started out initially, mentioned earlier, the rookies of 1979, the guys that I came into sport with. Cycle News was the motorcycle paper that everybody in the country looked for at their motorcycle shop every week, because it came out, and it had all of the results from all the racing and pictures and everything. It's how we all follow the sport. And every year before the season kicked off at the Houston Astrodome, they would do a Rookie of the Year um, uh, article, touting the 5 or 6 top candidates that they thought would probably be the Rookie of the Year that year. And I was one of those guys. And um, the 6 of us that were featured in that article 30 years later in 2009, um, Cycle News contacted all of us and said they'd like to do a follow-up, because all of us had gone on to, it had been a fairly consequential, I guess, group. I was one. I always laugh, kidded that I was the dud of the group, because I came into the sport with Wayne Rainey. Wayne went on to be a 3-time MotoGP world champion, before being paralyzed in a racing accident over in Italy, I think, Italy or Germany in 1993. One of the other guys was Scott Parker, who was 9-time AMA Grand National champion. I won 10 nationals. Scotty won 90 or something. He was the winningest rider in the sport. But we got together and met in 2009 at the MotoGP race in Indianapolis. And during that get together, we got together and played golf, the group of us. And Scotty Parker always liked to gamble. Didn't matter if it was, especially in golf. And of course, he took all our money. And so it was like $100 each. And there was, besides the 6 of us that were the rookie class 79, there were 10, 15 other people that played with us,
Right.
friends and stuff. And so sons of some of us riders. And, but, so Scotty had, $1,500 or $1,100, something sitting there, and he just threw it up on the table, and he says, I don't really want it. He says, let's donate it to one of the groups that supports racing. And at that time there was a group. It wasn't a real organized group, but it was called AIR, Aid to Injured Riders. And so we got a hold of them and gave them the money. But what we also agreed to at that table was that we needed to do something for the sport, than just give them $1,100 or whatever. And so we decided at that time to start raising money. And so we planned a golf tournament at one of the nationals at Springfield, Illinois,
Okay.
the following spring, and raised $30,000.
Wow, nice for the first year.
The first tournament. And what we did is we offered chances for fans to come play golf with us riders, and they came out in droves. We filled the course with people, fans and stuff that paid to play with their favorite riders. So raised $30,000, and at that point we donated that to AIR. And then we got to realizing, because they weren't a 501c3 charity, that we needed to do it correctly. We didn't want any tax issues, tax implications, and so we decided to go ahead and start our own charity. And at that time, it was called the Rookie Class of 79 Charity. That we realized after several years that it was difficult to explain. Now, people in the sport understood that. If you told them, the rookie class, they knew exactly who they were. But if you're talking to people outside the industry and outside of racing, too difficult. So that's when the board decided to change the name to Back on Track. And so we've been back on track since the end of 2022.
Now, as far as fundraising, what type of events do you host now?
We typically we still do some events. I just got back from Manhattan, Kansas this weekend. The Kansas Motorcycle Sportsman Association has a banquet every year, and they invite motorcyclists and racers. And they initiated a Kansas Motorcycle Hall of Fame there at this past weekend's event, and inducted 4 famous racers from Kansas, but I was up there and we raised about $8,000 for the charity up there at that event. They decided to make all the proceeds that were raised there for the charity, and we do a lot of bike raffles. Scott Conway's, has helped us in some of those. Uh, if the charity at times has had motorcycles donated.
Right.
I'm going to the Mecum auction this weekend. We're auctioning off a motorcycle that was donated to the charity, a 1968 Husqvarna 250, I believe it is.
You shared that with us. A good looking bike.
Yeah, it's great. It's in perfect, pristine condition. Looks just like the bike that Malcolm Smith rode in the movie that I referred to earlier on Any Sunday. So, it's a one that's very special to me, in my memory of this, of the movie, and how, what drove me to be sitting here with you today is that movie that made that impression on me. So yeah, it's kind of a cool deal. So we'll go out and we'll auction that off, and that will go to the charity. But you can go to our website, back-on-track.com, and see we've got other raffles. We're raffling off a race bike that was ridden by a rider that was injured in 2019 that the charity still supports, Oliver Brimley. He's from the UK and had a traumatic brain injury, and so we're raffling off his race bike. And the proceeds will go to Oliver, and then we're raffling off an Indian FTR 1200.
Okay.
And so yeah, we do most of the raffles. Yamaha's been really good to the charity, and they donate little Pee Wee 50s, and so we raffle those off and give them away at the events. Great to see the kids get excited.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, it's been very rewarding. Sure, like in your business a little bit, it's kind of one of those things we kind of hope they'll never need us.
Sure.
It's kind of a mixed kind of blessing, to be able to help, but you also are aware of the guys that get hurt, and so it's we're there when they need us, but we hope they never will.
They'll never need somebody, right?
But the reality is, yeah,
It's going to happen.
It happens, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now you're leaving when to go to the event?
I'll leave tomorrow. I fly out tomorrow. We're going to set up a booth there, which is, part of the reason we wanted to auction the motorcycle off, to raise as much money for the charity as we can, but also to advance the charity there's people there, motorcycle enthusiasts that if they're not in the dirt track world, they may not be familiar with the charity. So by being there, the Mecum auction has been very gracious and allowed us to set up a booth there, and to, just to share the word of the charity and what we're about and who we help. We expanded 2 years ago. We started out as just a charity that helps flat track motorcycle racers. Wayne Rainey, who I mentioned earlier, went on to be 3-time road race champion, right, world champion. And now Wayne and his group are the ones that promote all of the road racing that goes on Moto America in the United States. So it only made sense that we expanded the reach of the charity to cover his riders in his series. And so we did that 2 years ago. So now we've expanded, and of course that means the need for more money. And so, we're growing, kind of, with a purpose, but also, organically. And so this auction will hopefully help us spread the word.
I think that's fantastic. And, so many consequences come from racing, and people sacrifice so much to race, and it's difficult to make a living racing unless you're on the top tier.
Yeah.
So if you have an unfortunate incident, I'm sure it's even more detrimental to the family and to survival. So
we kind of when the 6 of us were there at Indianapolis and decided to start the charity, that was really the reason behind it was to the sport does ask so much of the people involved, and the money's, it's not like other pro sports. They get paid okay, but it's not what it should be, certainly. And so, big part of the mission of the charity was to allow guys that get hurt the support that it takes to if they choose to be able to come back, to not be forced to sell off everything or file bankruptcy or whatever. We wanted to try to come up with a way to helped get them over that tough part so they could come back to the sport. And that way, hopefully it would keep guys in the sport that wanted to stay. So that was part of it.
We'll make sure we have a link to this at the end of the video today.
Yeah.
But yesterday, your name came up again when I was talking to Gerald Timms, since he's on his way out there now. And boy, that's just Candyland for me. I'm not sure I can go to Meekin without coming home with something.
I know Gerald, he's an enthusiast himself. He's a collector, has the museum, Seba Station out there in Wellston. And he does doing his own collecting and buying and selling.
Hauling as well.
Right. It became the go-to guy for hauling for these millionaires that go to Meekum and buy up these motorcycles. And so, Gerald goes and he takes his bikes out that he wants to sell and buys the ones he wants to buy. And then when he sits there and watches the other guys, the bikes that he can't afford to buy or doesn't want in his collection, when they buy him this, he goes over and says, who are you going to have deliver it? And they say, well, you are. And so that's, I think Gerald does real well just being a delivery guy for all these guys that buy these motorcycles.
I told him last night I had to send him an invoice for my time yesterday, because after he told me about the auction, which I wasn't even aware it was coming up, I spent way too much time going through the auction day by day and looking at the lots and doing searches for what I would love to have. And, I'm sending him links to look at a lot for me, but I don't need more motorcycles. But who needs more motorcycles? We all need more motorcycles, right?
Yeah, I've done the same thing. And yeah, it's like the motorcycles that you don't even know that you want, when they come up on there, you go, oh man, I'd really like to have that bike. Yeah.
What I like about motorcycle enthusiasts is that we all have different things we gravitate to.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Heritage Springer on there, which is gorgeous with very low miles. And I just kept looking at that bike last night, but that wouldn't be the same thing that you would look at probably. So it's kind of funny how we all have different affinities, but it's toward the motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I the Heritage Springer, I didn't have a Springer, but I've had probably 6 Harley Heritages, over the years, and a few Road Kings and a couple of Street Glides and Ultra Classics. And yeah, just, had all kinds of different street bikes too. But, I mentioned to you earlier that I always got on a motorcycle when I was a kid and was always trying to go too fast, and got on somebody's sport bike back in the day and decided I wasn't going to ride a sport bike unless I was on a road race course, which is what I did. And so I really didn't ever think I'd own a street bike. And then somebody, Scotty Adams, a buddy of mine here in town, his dad found an old lowrider or something that he bought, and I was overseeing Scotty one time, and he said, go take this thing for a ride around. I was like, no, I don't ride street bikes. I don't get out on the street. I decided I wasn't, I didn't want to ride. I was always trying to go fast, so I didn't think a Harley would
go fast,
would excite me, and so I thought, well, I no need to ride it, but he wouldn't let up. And it was a summer night, about 85 degrees still, and I went out and rode around the block, never got over about 30 miles an hour, and just chugged around the neighborhood and could smell the grass. And a month later I had my first Heritage. So
it doesn't take much to get addicted, does it? So you mentioned Sturgis a few years ago. What do you ride at Sturgis?
Well, we've ridden up Sturgis the last few years. I've got had Harley's, Street Glide, Ultra Classic, Limited, and then most recently an Indian Chieftain.
Okay.
And great bike. That's how I met Scott. We started, through racing a little bit, but also, going to Sturgis. And so, Scott's turned into a flat track fan. I think he came back late and sponsored riders and sponsored me and others. And so, yeah, he's one of my favorite, dealers here in town.
Well, he's been on the show already as well, but yeah, the flat tracks are here at Remington Park. It was a mile track. Has that been 2 years ago? 3?
It's been 2 or 3 years ago since they've had it. I was involved in the initial part of bringing that race here with Sean Brassfield, who promoted the race and came, and then it didn't come back for a couple of years, and then it came back. And there's always different things going on with the horse racing community, and they put different surfaces down, and some they don't want motorcycles on them. I don't know that it damages them, but it's still the horse people it's a little bit of a battle, so the race hasn't been around for a couple of years, but I'm still hopeful that it will come back, in the next 2 or 3 years.
And something I don't know about you, and I know about your flat tracking career. Have you road raced as well?
The little bit of road racing I did wasn't on the AMA road racing schedule. It was on another series called WERA,
Okay, I didn't know that.
WRA. And so, I did do some road racing. It was costly enough just trying to come up with a competitive dirt track program, for the national series. And so I just didn't have the money to add in a road racing program, a competitive one. So the little bit that I did was just to see if I was good enough, but, just never did go ahead and take the step to go ahead and try to put together a road race program.
Fascinating, because I followed the dirt tracking and actually some through Scott, and then like I told you my earlier days here in Oklahoma City. But yeah, I think that's a cool way to watch a track is you can turn left and watch the bikes go. Are you a MotoGP fan too?
I'm a huge MotoGP fan just because the first national event that I ever won was in the Houston Astrodome, and the guy that I beat, raced with the entire main event, was Kenny Roberts.
Okay.
And Kenny at that time had just gone over to Europe and won the MotoGP championship, was kind of the first American, but he was the first in a string of American flat track racers, which included Wayne Rainey that I mentioned,
Right.
who was a dirt tracker, Eddie Lawson, who was a dirt tracker that was also MotoGP champion, Freddie Spencer, Kevin Schwantz, Nicky Hayden was the latest. All American dirt track
They're
racers.
retiring his number now. Did you see that?
Yeah. Nicky was killed
In a bicycle accident.
on a bicycle accident at Misano in Italy. Um, yeah, terrible loss. But yeah, all those guys that I mentioned came up, kind of honed their skills in dirt tracking and went on to be MotoGP world champions. So of course, all the American flat track world, has followed the MotoGP series religiously. And of course, it hasn't been nearly so common that American dirt trackers have gone over to dominate. There's other countries that got really aggressive. Spain being one that started. Their government, I think, started subsidizing the bringing up, of talented racers and sort of helping subsidize their careers to get them to be Marc Marquez and Jorge Lorenzo and others that have come up, in Spain. And there's others in Italy that are, Valentino Rossi has gone on to set up a school to do the same exact thing. So yeah, Europe got real aggressive when they saw these Americans, these Yanks coming over to take away their world titles.
Well, Rossi's done a good job of culminating new talent. I mean, the leaders in the pack right now are out of his school.
Yeah, exactly. He sees it, and Rossi set up his own kind of flat track training school at his house, and it's anybody that follows the sport can find YouTube or TikToks or whatever of people, all the guys that go over and ride at Rossi's ranch. And man, it for me as a rider and a flat track racer, it just looks I probably could, if I could find the time and whatever, I probably have the connections to get a hold of Rossi and go over there and do it. So maybe one of these days it'll still happen. I don't know, but yeah, it looks like a blast.
I think he's got motocross tracks too from the videos I've seen, but I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, he's got a little bit of, I don't know how many acres he's got over there in Italy, but yeah, it's beautiful, and just, and he's got all the equipment he needs and everything. The surface looks pristine. It's just,
He's got the funding too, though.
Yeah. He's got plenty of money to do what he wants, but it's maybe one of these days I'll get over there.
So why are there not any Americans in the top tier class?
Pardon?
Why are there no Americans in the top tier MotoGP?
Why aren't there?
Yeah, there's some coming up in the MotoGP 2.
The part of it has to do with the couple of things, I think. Part of it is the dirt track, just the sheer number of riders. Like we discussed earlier about the tracks going away, that means there's less riders coming into the sport. The sport, unfortunately, hasn't the money in the sport hasn't hasn't matched other sports in terms of growth, which, any young kid looks up and sees LeBron James
Right.
driving a Bentley, and then he looks over and sees the guys racing motorcycles, and if they're driving Bentleys, well, then he might decide he wants to become that. It was the movie On Any Sunday that made me, want to do it. Since there's not movies like that come out every year, these kids have to find something that draws them to the sport, and so the sport hasn't really kept up in terms of the financial draw to it. So just the sheer numbers has dropped off. So that means there's less talent coming into the sport that will find its way over to the Grand Prix circuits in Europe. So that's part of it. The other thing is the motorcycles have changed. The reason flat track motorcycle racers were so good, like when Kenny Roberts went over and all the others, is the tires and the motorcycles back then slid around a lot. The tires weren't so good, so being really comfortable sliding both the front and rear tires, without panicking and chopping the throttle or whatever, keeping the gas on, was something that dirt trackers, they were totally comfortable with that feeling. And so when they went over and road race, they could go beyond the limit of the current group of road racers who panicked or froze when the both tires started sliding. So Kenny went over there and sliding both tires, and he could go so much faster. And so all the other Americans, Wayne Rainey and Eddie Lawson and Freddie Spencer and Kevin Schwantz, all the others that went over there, I won't say they had an easy time of it, but they were their training, and it wasn't lost on the Europeans. And so these dirt track schools, Kenny Roberts ultimately went over in the 90s and set up a training ranch, I think at the behest of the Spanish government. Actually, I think kind of funded Kenny to set up a school over there. And one of the first Spanish world champions that had gone through Alex Crivier, that went through Kenny's training ranch, kind of sent a message. And so that's how Rossi's training ranch and all these others kind of kicked off. And so it's taken that advantage away from the Americans.
But anyway, well, Ronnie, I thank you for being on the show today. And it's very nice meeting you. And I'd like to have you on again. We'll talk about some other topics. But Ronnie, with Back on Track,
Mhm.
and we'll have that posted out there for our guests.
Okay.
This is Ted Leslie with Let Off the Clutch, brought to you by my biker attorney. Thank you.